Well, it's really awesome to be here and have the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing up in the Arctic. We work up in Hudson Bay, which is that giant hole right in the northern part of northern Canada. Often kind of the forgotten part of the Arctic because it's not the Northwest Passage, but there's a lot going on there. One of the biggest features is that it drains over 40% of Canada and part of the States. So the amount of fresh water that goes into that is just absolutely massive. It's equivalent to a quarter of the fresh water that goes into the Arctic Ocean, for example. And a quarter of that water is behind hydroelectric dams, which I'll come back and talk to you about later. This is what it looks like in the winter. It's seasonal sea ice, so it's frozen over all winter long, and this provides critical habitat for a bunch of animals like polar bears, of course, and a bunch of other wildlife that Inuit rely on for their subsistence hunting. We work mostly down here in the southeast corner of Hudson Bay. This amazing geography of the Belcher Islands, it's called, where is a really unique place. And the Inuit there had no caribou. So most Inuit used caribou for their clothing and food, but they didn't have any caribou. And so what they used was eider ducks. This is a male on the bottom, this is a female here. These ones, most birds migrate from the Arctic in the winter. These ones stay up there all winter, diving underneath the ice to get mussels and sea urchins, which they swallow whole to survive. And their technology is the warmest feather in the world. Eider down, you might have heard eider down. You can get, it's rarer than a Rolls Royce, it's all hand-picked. Iceland has a niche on the market. It's about $10,000 to buy a duvet. And so the community's been working traditionally. They sewed the skins of the birds together to make clothing out of the full feathers. And these days people collect the down from the nest after the birds are gone, and then they just put it into kind of modern textiles. And as Karen mentioned, we made a film. It's mostly a cultural film about 100 years ago, modern life, the feather tying the past and present together, being their energy solution or their technology that brings in the environmental story. And it's on Netflix. You can go to peopleofafeather.com. For a $5 donation to the charity, you can watch it on Vimeo there. And it's really kind of helped raise the profile of issues in Hudson Bay and a lot about the culture. If you want to know what it's like to live in an Arctic community in the north, not everyone lives in igloos anymore, is the spoiler alert. There's a hip hop video in there. There's lots to really get to know the community. And so as a legacy to this, we started the charity called the Arctic Eider Society, with the eider and the warmest feather in the world being our symbol. And so we do a lot more than study ducks, although that's how I got started. I was filming them dive underneath the ice for my PhD work. But really the feather is a symbol for like working with nature for energy solutions and technology. So the sort of work we do is we do research with Inuit, trying to get people employment with skills. People are now starting a cottage eider down industry, for example. We're working to train hunters to do environmental monitoring. There's a lot of talk about development for the north, and they're like, yeah, we have to train local people to go in the mines. And we're like, no, we need to train people that they know what's on the go with the environment, the ecosystem. We want to give them meaningful jobs in environmental monitoring, environmental assessment that uses their skills and provides culturally relevant employment. As a part of that, we're also engaging youth. So when we are hiring hunters to go out on the land to do oceanography or ecology, we're partnering students up. This is Daniel. Super inspired. He went to school, top of his school at the Arctic College, and is now the wildlife officer, the first Inuit wildlife officer in his community, which is really awesome. And you can see he's working with his father there to put out a piece of oceanographic equipment to measure salinity. We're community-based, but we consider ourselves community-driven. So we've been working with the community for 15 years. We consult with people closely to see what they want done. Even though we might be paying honorarium to hunters and youth to go out, we still consider it's not them working for us, we're working for the community. And so that's really important to us. And a lot of that involves working on locally relevant issues. So I mentioned hydroelectric projects. Some of the biggest hydroelectric projects in the world are up in James Bay, Hudson Bay. They power Quebec, New York. There's a lot of different things going on, but basically everyone needs to turn up their thermostats in winter. Normally rivers peak in the spring, so they're reversing the seasons of the hydrological cycle, and all that water gets dumped onto the ice in the middle of the winter. And fresh water freezes a lot different. It freezes quicker, and we get these, and it floats on salt water. So large areas can freeze up really quick. You might have heard about the killer whales that got trapped in Nukchuak, which is just north, belugas, and then tens of thousands of eiders can get trapped in the ice and die, basically. They run out of food and competing for food. So we're also kind of thinking about sustainable wildlife populations, sustainable harvesting, co-management. We work with Environment Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And we're also thinking about policy and solutions. How can we manage water better using existing dams? communities next to all these dams are burning diesel. How can we think about integrative solutions to work together to kind of address the issue? Also towards stewardship, Hudson Bay is a whole bunch of jurisdictions, Ontario, Nunavut, Manitoba, Quebec, and overlapping land claim agreements. Particularly in Hudson Bay, it's one of the most complex interjurisdictional regions of the Arctic. And so we're basically bringing hunters together in 3 jurisdictions from 5 communities. Hunters are going out on the ice. You can see here they've documented a layer of fresh water that's about over 25 meters deep. And so how can we connect these communities? We're doing parallel programs in these different communities. And so our approach is to try and provide a way to map, to put all this data on there in near real time so hunters can see what's going on in the different communities and share their knowledge. This is a Belchers in Google Maps. This big blue area right here is where we do most of our work, because this is what it looks like in the winter. And so all of our landscape marks are ice-scape marks. And so we've been working to try and bring in some Landsat and MODIS imagery to get on there so that we can put the deployments of tools on the maps. You can see CTDs, ice core, some of the work that we do with the hunters. We've got MODIS on the big layer, and you can see it's basically a social network for the north that we're trying to develop as well. So we have like a news feed like you get on Facebook that shows all the work that's done. You can see the work in the different communities. You zoom in, there's Landsat. You can see we have different tools used in the same place. We've developed some clustering for that. You can click on this. You can see the hunters that were involved in the work are all tagged in that work. You can see the results. This is a CTD cast. This is an ice core sample, and you can upload photos. You can have social media comments that are integrated in that. You can go to the hunter's profile. You can see all the work that they've done and go to that on the map. In each of the communities, you can go and see all the different hunters that are involved in the work in the different communities. You can go and look at the different tools and learn a little bit about how the tools, how do you interpret the data. And so some of the things that we're working on now, people have probably heard that, Inuit have hundreds of words for different types of snow, which also includes ice. So we've been, on Facebook you can tag a person. We're developing the technology now to be able to tag ice using Inuit terminology. So when Inuit are going out and they're trying to interpret some of the data or talk about, there's dangerous ice conditions in this area, they can use their own dialect and terminology to do that. We're also being able to tag wildlife, and you can go to the profile of wildlife, see all the research that's been done associated with that species. And at Clue Up, Riley and Karen came up and we did some of the first street view out on the ice. This is only the 3rd community in the Arctic that has street view in the community, but we also went out to the Plinias, which are these little oases, and to the flow edge. And so you'll be able to go out and explore and see what it's like on the ice. That's going to be coming out in December, I believe. And so part of that, you'll be able to see the different research that's done embedded in that. But one of the really cool things that we're working, we also develop culturally relevant curriculum for high schools. So we have an Arctic sea ice educational project that we've been working to develop. And you can't bring a field trip of students out to the ice in the middle of winter very easily. But we can bring students out using Street View to understand. We can have the curriculum, lesson plan content embedded in that Street View imagery. They can be using data to learn math and science that hunters have collected from their community. So really trying to bring culturally relevant education. And then a bunch of our media content, time-lapse above the ice, underwater video underneath the ice. We're trying to bring this all together in a common place. And the knowledge, basically to mobilize knowledge for all these different regions in Hudson Bay in order to address some of the environmental justice issues and provide environmental stewardship for the region. Thank you very much.
About the interactive knowledge mapping, what other tools or what were the tools that you use for this?
Yeah, so right now we've developed functionality for CTDs, which is salinity and temperature depth profiling. So that shows how much fresh water is underneath the ice there from the dams, for example. And we can use it for modeling. We work with the University of Manitoba to model kind of bigger scale oceanographic processes related to that. The ice core sampling, water sampling, those are the main ones that we've tested so far. We're developing participatory mapping tools to go on there, the functionality for different kind of ice, for telling hunting stories. There's wildlife sampling, so we're doing some work on contaminants in the area as well. So hunters are collecting different animals, and so they can show where they were collected, and basically all the different tools that are being done from research and traditional knowledge sorts of sources as well. Yeah.
I have a question regarding the collecting data. So if there's a location where you can't access easily, how are you going to do that, particularly with the snow covers?
Yeah, so our big challenge, now that we're working in 5 communities, each community has, depending on what the ice conditions are like in a given winter, how far you can go. And so each of them has their own piece of the puzzle. So we're trying to piece together the big scale picture about what's going on in East Hudson Bay. The challenge now is between the islands and the mainland. That's our big gap. So we're seeing, you know, like almost 20 layers of fresh water near the islands, 25 to 28 meters near the mainland. So we're assuming it probably looks the same. But we're going to try and get out with the Canadian Rangers. And people used to, there was no trading post. People used to go across the ice bridge for a couple of weeks in winter to go and trade. And so you could do that. You can't do it as much anymore, except last winter we might have been able to. So we're going to try and get that. Industry at some point is going to have to, they've been avoiding, like hydroelectric projects. There's a long history of the James Bay, power going to New York, shutting down the Great Wheel River project. There's a lot. They've come a long way in terms of thinking about river impacts and the land that's flooded, but the can of worms about where all that water goes downstream is not a can of worms that they're very willing to open. So we're working to leverage that, and at some point we're going to need, there's an obligation in the most recent dam that went in that there needs to be a cumulative impact study done once we can overcome the jurisdictional challenges. And so they're going to, hopefully we can get helicopters out and do some CTV casts and piece together that part too. Yeah. Thank you.